I am Matthew Kelly, and welcome to Profoundly Human. My guests today are Ethan and Maya Hawke. Ethan Hawke is an actor, screenwriter, filmmaker, and best-selling author whose breakthrough performance came over 3 decades ago in the classic film Dead Poets Society. He remains one of the most acclaimed artists of his generation, nominated for 4 Academy Awards, 2 as an actor and 2 as a writer. His incredible screen performances include the Before Sunrise trilogy, First Reformed, the global franchise The Purge, Training Day, and countless others. Maya Hawke is an actress, producer, singer-songwriter, and the daughter of Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman. Maya made her screen debut as Jo March in the 2017 BBC adaptation of Little Women, for which she won Best Actress at the Women's Image Network Awards. She is also an accomplished musician, and her 3rd album, Chaos Angel, is soon to be released. I recently had the chance to visit with Ethan and Maya Hawke to discuss their new movie, Wildcat, which observes the life of the author Flannery O'Connor while she was struggling to write her first novel. Our conversation was far-reaching and fascinating. Listen, enjoy, reflect, and allow their message to reinvigorate the way you live, work, and relate. Maya and Ethan Hawke, my guests today for Profoundly Human. Guys, great to be with you. Thanks for joining.
It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, our pleasure.
So you've done so many fantastic projects and on your own, and I'm really looking forward to talking a little bit about your music a little later, Maya, if you're up for that as well.
Of course.
But I gotta ask, what is it like coming together and working on a project like this?
Well, I think it seems probably mysterious to people, like, wow, you're making a movie with your daughter, or you're making a movie with your father. And I can't speak for Maya, but it happened so slowly and so organically. I think we're both still in shock it actually came to be. You know, the thing about the movie business that people don't often understand is we have lots of ideas for movies that never happen, and scripts that you work on for years that you think are going to come. And so many little things have to go right for a group of people to actually be on set, filming something, editing it, releasing it. So many little things have to go right. And this movie probably started so long ago when Maya first was discovering Flannery O'Connor. She brought me the prayer journal. Flannery's prayer journal opened up a conversation between the two of us that I guess Flannery invited us into the deep end of the pool of a conversation about faith and creativity. And Maya really just had a passion for it that I share. And it gave us I don't know, sometimes even though you're the same family, especially when somebody's 15, 16, 17 years old, they're going and flying off in their own way. And Flannery's work became a place where Maya and I could really engage in meaningful conversations about where she was as an adult person. And it also forced me to revisit what did I think about them? And then Maya had this idea to play this character. She had taken the prayer journal and worked on it as a monologue. I should let you tell the story. But anyway, it was clear the artist in me recognized that this young actor had a bee in her bonnet to play this person. And as an actor myself, I always want to, like, that's what makes you want to make a movie, when somebody has a hit on a character. You know, you always hear these stories about Scorsese did Raging Bull because De Niro had such a passion to play Jake LaMotta. And he's like, all right, I can put that on film. And so the collaboration just happened slowly, that by the time we were actually filming it, we've been talking about it for 7, 8 years, right? How am I doing?
I mean, you're doing amazing. I just completely agree with you. But what I was gonna say is that, you know, as we were gearing into filming, people kept coming up to us and being like, are you nervous? Like, what are you most nervous about? Is it gonna be bad to work together? And we were both nervous to, you know, take on her work and nervous to have the pressure of people giving you money to make a movie and having to deliver them a product. That made us nervous. But working together, we weren't nervous about it at all. And I think it's partially because through my entire life, we've used making art together to deepen our relationship, and to explore both phases that we were in our lives. I mean, whether it was becoming a father and different phases in fatherhood, or adolescence and childhood troubles and teen years, we used coming together over writing poetry, reading a play, going to the theater, going to the movies, as a kind of, I mean, not to be too on theme for this conversation, but as a way of going to church together and looking out at the world to reflect on where we were and what we were learning and how we could communicate better. So the act of working on art together, I think, is deeply in the DNA of our relationship, and how we've brought each other up in the last 25 years.
So Maya, I think it's interesting that next year will be 100 years since Flannery O'Connor was born, and you are this amazing woman in the 21st century. What drew you to her, and what endures? Like, you've obviously had this long journey with her. Maybe some things in the beginning were shiny to you, but what themes have endured and continue to pop up in your daily life?
I would say that the things that have most endured is really the initial spark for me, which was this young, extremely ambitious young woman trying to figure out how to not have her ambition be the impediment to her dream. Because just ambition is going to lead you into blindness, right? You have to be attempting to serve something larger than yourself. And the only thing that she was really taught to serve was God. But figuring out how to serve the arts and to serve her own imagination and have that be in service of something greater than herself, I think that was what really drew me to it, and what draws me to it to this day.
Fantastic. When you think about this movie versus other movies, is there more of a message there? Obviously, it's a very big passion point for you. What sort of person do you want to see this movie? And what do you want them to be thinking, feeling 15 minutes, 15 days, 15 years after they see it?
Dad, I'd be curious about your answer to this. I feel like what you always say, I agree with, is that if you start thinking about the audience, you've kind of lost the plot. You have to think about the work, and hopefully it will find its audience. And anytime you're like, oh, this is for kids, I mean, take a Pixar movie, for example. Those are for kids, but they're some of the most adult movies I've ever seen. A movie like WALL-E or Up, those are profound pieces. So I think my dad has taught me not to think too much about the audience. But I hope it, of course, I hope it finds young women. I hope it finds people who love Flannery O'Connor. But I really hope it finds whoever is curious about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that Maya said when the idea was first being born, was how wonderful it would be to see a film about a young woman's journey where the primary relationship was to the divine, to herself, and to her work. That so often movies and dramas about young women growing up are all having to do with their relationships to others, and we've seen tons of movies about men's relationship to their work, and they're driven, and what their faith crises are. The literature, film, it's tons of it. The library's full of it. But the female journey with that, particularly for a young woman, is really exciting. And I do hope that the movie speaks to that and it encourages and lights that flame. But I remember a friend once saying to me that really great films start when the end credits roll. When you're walking out of the theater, it's like ringing a bell, and the bell is supposed to vibrate out, and you're supposed to take with it what you bring to it. And I think one of the things that we found so exciting about Flannery's short stories is they don't dictate to you what they mean. She is one of the greatest writers at invoking that word mystery, and the mystery of why we're born, why we have to die, why we go through all this, what is it for? And she doesn't provide answers that you're supposed to take away. She asks incredibly penetrating questions that vibrate with you. And that's kind of what I wanted the end of the movie to be, is a kind of a cone, so to speak, of a little prayer that it's almost like the whole movie is actually whatever's happening in the last few seconds of our film is like the whole movie leads up to that. And then it's supposed to send off. And so I hope it vibrates with people, but obviously if you worry too much, about achieving a goal, you have to worry about what you're trying to say, not how people react to what you say. Right.
Yes. Yeah. So when we think about this movie, Ethan, in the context of say your life and your career, I was in high school when Dead Poets came out, and I bet my friends and I watched that movie 20 times in the first year it came out, and we quoted all the time, and it's just a fantastic piece of work. And obviously there you got to work with Robin Williams. And then if you think about something like Training Day and working with Denzel, and how do you look at these projects and say, that one's for me? And as you say, so many get started that don't get finished, but how do you choose a project and say, I want to get after this?
I believe a lot in intuition. And there's a lot of different words that people use for intuition, your inner voice, a guiding spirit. And that can take on a kind of tone that seems mystic or something, but I've said this before, I've said this to Maya while she's growing up, is that I really think that we find out who we are by what we love. And the more we engage in things where it's easy to access love, the more our love grows, right? And the more it expands. And so some projects are really easy. It's a love of acting. I got the script for Training Day, and I sat there and read this thing, and I could picture what Denzel Washington was going to do with this part. And I thought, the only way this movie is going to go bad if the guy sitting in the car next to him stinks. And I was like, put me in, coach. And so it's really a love of acting that draws you to it. This movie was Wildcat. It is born out of my own daughter, who knows me so well, coming to me and saying, hey, can you make a film about your inner life? You haven't made art about your faith, and you talk about it all the time, but could it be a part of your professional life? And could we use Flannery O'Connor? And so this person who knows me extremely well almost is asking me to be the best version of myself, and that's very exciting. Dead Poets Society, I mean, as a kid, right? I mean, that's great fortune to be surrounded by Robin Williams and Peter Weir, and that script was so beautiful. The reason why you guys are reciting those lines back and forth is the lines are incredible. It's a beautiful text.
Yeah.
So I think that, as life goes on, you do some things to have fun. And sometimes you have 4 kids and you have to pay a bill, and you have to find a way to support your family and not embarrass yourself. And so you're walking this razor's edge of trying to be a professional artist, right? To make relevant work that the community is interested in. I often think what our job is with Maya's music, with Stranger Things, with different things that we've done, we're conversation starters. That's what the artistic, some people build houses, some people make dinner, some people police the streets, some people work in hospitals, and other people's job is, at Thanksgiving, what are we going to talk about? And whether it's the painting on your back wall or Flannery O'Connor, we're trying to remind people of why we're alive, and what to do with our days. And so I use that voice inside my head because, is this a meaningful conversation? Does this do anything? Does this help? And I try to pay my rent.
Yeah.
There's also speaking of the inner voice, there's a weird thing that happens. Tell me if you think that this is wrong. When about memorization, as an actor, you have to memorize all these lines, and sometimes they're really easy to memorize. Sometimes you read the script and you're looking at the character, you're thinking about doing the audition, and the lines jump into your head, and you know what the character is going to say next because that's what they would say next. And sometimes it is like trying to nail like pins into a piece of steel. Like it's impossible. And a lot of the time, and maybe this is just laziness, but a lot of the time, that's a big part of the way that I make decisions is like, does my brain want to take in this information? Or does it not? And sometimes that's laziness, and sometimes it's the intuition in your brain or something.
And I think maybe just being ready for the message, right? Because you could hear exactly the same message 12 months from now, and it could be the most powerful thing you've heard in 10 years, even though you heard it a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's where you are in the journey, not necessarily where the message is. But as we think about this particular film, Maya, how did you prepare for the role? How did you get yourself ready to play this astounding woman?
If I did a good job, I did a good job because I had time. I've never had this kind of time before. I mean, the only other argument I could make for a time in my life as an actor where I had this kind of time was my first ever job where I got to play Joe March in Little Women. And the time I had was only the time I'd spent in my life loving that book. And this movie is similar to that for me. I'd gotten to put time in reading Flannery, doing the monologue as my audition monologue, looking at the prayer journal, reading the stories, looking at it in English class, looking at it as with my dad later. And it's, the kind of actor cliches, it's not how well you know it, it's how long you've known it. And then I got to have my voice teacher from drama school help me as a voice coach on this film. And I got to work on that months in advance before and practice having my teeth in, because I knew that this movie was going to happen. When you get cast in something, you often have between a month and 2 days to get ready and show up on set. And in this job, I had years. And so if I did a good job, that's why. And that's how I prepared, was time.
Fantastic. As you look back on the experience, is there anything that you would do differently, or even say, hey, I wish I had even more time for that?
You always want more time for your accent and your body work, I mean, like, you always are like, did I do the lupus well enough? Did I know enough about lupus? Like, what does it feel like when your joints hurt? Like, I know I imagined it, but what does it feel like? And like, did I imagine it enough? There, of course, and like, there's always things, but really, I wouldn't wish to change anything about how this process went. How we were to each other, how we treated the text. It's the thing that's brought me the most joy and deepened my relationship to my creative life so much. And I wouldn't wish anything to be different.
You said if I did a good job, you did.
Thank you.
You're fantastic, and I just think the project itself is just bold. And there's just such a need, I think, for that boldness in our culture today. I think in any art there is a safe, and certainly a commercially safe, path to walk. And I just think this is a beautiful and bold project. Ethan, when you sat down and think about writing this, what was your process there?
Well, I really I've done twice in my life, I've had the opportunity to do this, where you're writing something for an actor, and that changes how you think about it. And for example, there's one of my favorite scenes in the movie is a scene with Liam Neeson, where Flannery is having a real spiritual crisis, and her priest comes to visit her, and he thinks he's just going to meet some young woman. He wants to, he's got someplace to be at 5. I mean, he's just wants to give her the pamphlets and take confession and move on. And he meets Flannery O'Connor. And not just her, he meets her on a day when she's in crisis. And I knew the movie, I knew that scene needed to be the heart of the film. And forgive me, Maya, but I've just been wildly impressed with my daughter throughout my life. Not with what she's done or anything, but who she is. On a Wednesday in March, sometime, when I've seen her brain work so fast and so intelligently. She's covering her face, but it's okay. And what it's like to be with a young person who's thinking so many thoughts at one time, and there aren't answers. And all you want to do is say, breathe. You're so smart. You can handle this, but so I'm writing a scene that is both trying to capture feelings I've had as a father with Maya, and trying to capture this, ferocious intellect of questioning that's taking place in the prayer journal. We're trying to channel that, and we're trying to create drama. So it's kind of thrilling. And then I have the added benefit of being able to call up Maya and say, come on over. I've got a first draft. What do you think? And you can hear the words come out of her mouth. Yeah. What about, but is it getting this much? Is it funny? Because Flannery's also funny. And how can it, it was so challenging and so rewarding to be so all in on something, to writing about it from so many different angles. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So Maya, your dad's writing this thing. You guys are back and forth on it. What does it feel like to give your dad feedback?
I wouldn't say it felt like feedback. Like it felt like we were making something together, and that I'd asked him to do something incredibly difficult. And he came to me really early in this process with the idea to integrate the stories. Because a big problem, when I asked him to do this, I presented him with a massive problem, which is that this woman's life is not very dramatic. She didn't have a great love story. She didn't go on a crazy adventure. The drama to be found, especially if you want to keep the story contained. Like, we didn't want to make it about Yato. Like, we didn't want to make a movie about the Fitzgeralds and like have Flannery be a character in the movie of someone else's life that was exciting. We wanted it to be about her. And so I knew, like, I asked him to do it because I had no idea how. I knew I wanted to play this person, but I could not imagine a story for her, that would carry an audience through a full-length film. And he did. And he came up with this idea that actually what is so special about her is that the adventures happened inside her inner life. And that she brought the world into her through her imagination. And especially in the wake of the pandemic, that we all went through, where we had to figure out a way to bring the world to us, and sometimes we found good ways to do that, sometimes we found bad ways to do that, but it just felt so poignant to me. And once that happened, and that idea was alive, that we would tell her story by dramatizing her imagination through her short stories, never felt like feedback. It felt like we were creating something together, and that he had this idea, and this world he wanted to paint and build, that I wanted to be a part of. So I'd be like, I don't know, like, I feel like maybe we need to start like in this spot, maybe, I don't know, and I don't know. It felt really fun. He would come to my apartment sometimes, and I'd like try to put in the teeth, and we'd read the lines out loud and see how the scene felt, and be like, oh, that beat's not hitting. Like, why isn't it hitting? I guess maybe, maybe Regina needs to be listening from outside. Whatever it was, these little shifts that would occur, to have that point hit home about what she says about her mom. Maybe we need to see her mom, see her say, whatever it was. But it was just collaborative and creative, and his idea was great. And I've now talked too long.
Ethan, you said that twice you've had the opportunity to write
Mm.
for a specific actor, is that easier or more difficult?
Oh, it's much easier for me because I come at everything. I've tried my hand at making documentaries. I've written novels. I've done graphic novels. I've kind of shifted, but I come at all of the jobs as an actor. I'm a performing artist. I'm a storyteller. That's what I like to do. And the joy of directing for me is to create a space for an actor or actors to thrive. A lot of times in, the professional world of commercial movies, the set is one of the least creative places I've ever been on. It can be absolutely stifling. You feel you're making a unit of sail. There's 20 people going, should he go left? Should he go right? I feel like the light's too bright. It doesn't, when I was a kid and I was on the set of Dead Poets Society, right? That's my bar. You can't unsee that. I watched Robin Williams be creative. I watched Peter Weir put speakers up in the back of the classroom. We're doing that final scene when I say, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." Peter Weir had giant speakers blasting the soundtrack from The Mission. So you see all these young people with tears in their eyes and everything. Well, it's because we felt it. We had a great director building an environment for actors to thrive. And then for example, you mentioned Denzel Washington. Denzel brings that. You can't stop him from doing that. It's wonderful. It doesn't matter how big the budget of a movie is. He brings that level of integrity to the performance. But a lot of times you don't have somebody like him around to lead. And I like directing to create a space where it's a set like I would want to act in. And so I like to write for an actor to thrive. I'm like, I'll be working on the speech with Liam, for example, and I just know in the back of my mind, I'm going, Maya will crush this. People would say to me, they'd see the length of the monologue, it was like a page and a half monologue. And they'd be like, well, Ethan, that's really too long. They'd be like, oh, you haven't heard Maya talk. This will be 30 seconds. Like this young woman can talk. Like this, no problem. This is not too long. It might be too short. You can put a ton of ammo in that gun. That gun's going to go off.
How did I hear there's a fun story about how Liam Neeson came to be involved in the project. Can you share that story with us?
Well, he's just one of the greatest actors of our time. And he was a big, I made a documentary about Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward called The Last Movie Stars. And he was very interested in that doc. And he wrote me a letter saying how much he liked it. And he said, you're a pretty good director. If you ever have a part for an old Irishman, give me a call. And I wrote him back. I said, funny, I do. And he said, well, he wrote me back. He said, that'll be $1 US. And, so he's a fan of Maya's, and he was a fan of the world. It was only important to him that we do a good job. And so he was
also extremely close with Miss Laura Linney.
Yes, I shouldn't leave that out.
And she and him are old friends who are very, very, very close. And I think he was very excited to come see her and work with her too. And just a note on her is just, we can talk more about her, but she did what, for me at least, how you describe what Denzel does. Mm-hmm. She did that for me. She set a bar on set of integrity and talent and work ethic and capacity and homework that, just like, I barely slept trying to keep up with her. When I got to set, when I was working with her the first time, I lost my accent on the first couple of days because hers just came so naturally and confidently. It was like you didn't even notice that she'd switched vocal patterns. You were like, oh, that's how you talk. So anyway, she did for me what it sounds like Denzel did for you.
Well, Liam was brilliant. I mentioned to somebody that he was in it, and that he was playing the role of a priest, and the person's comment was, well, I just got to see it just to see Liam Neeson play a priest, Yeah. But he was brilliant. Maya, Flannery, you were touching on earlier sort of the ordinariness of it, and how she was able to draw meaning from the ordinary. I think in our entitled culture, people say, I want meaningful work, which means they want someone to make that work meaningful for them. And
Absolutely.
And what I saw you do, what I heard you say today, and what I saw you do with Flannery was to draw out how she was able to inject meaning into things, and that she was able to find authenticity in the ordinary. And I think in our culture today, people are giving up authenticity because they're allergic to ordinary, but maybe it's just more ordinary that we need. And I guess I'm curious, how has that experience changed how you choose projects going forward? I know you're working in film. I know you're working in music. Like when you think about, okay, what do I want to do this year? Or what do I want to do this month? How is that influencing you or affecting you?
I think that it has played a giant part in a shift in my relationship to the feedback loop. I'm still working on it, which is why I choose my words so carefully. I've in no way completed this journey. And by the feedback loop, what I mean is it's really easy to forget why you're doing what you're doing. It's 5 or 6 years ago, I found this journal entry that I wrote about why did I enjoy school plays more than professional plays on stage. And I was obsessed with it. I was like, what? I know that this play that I'm watching that's professional is better, but I'm at the theater of the school play of my brother doing a Brecht play at school we both went to in Brooklyn, and I'm having way more fun. And why? And I think part of the reason is that you can feel in the room that everyone is there because they want to be there. They're not being paid. They're not doing it to try to get to the next better job. They're off the treadmill and are volunteering for a joyful community activity. And it's really easy and most people who want to be actors because they enjoyed that experience. A lot of the time, they're like, that's where I felt safe. That's where I felt inspired. That's where I felt good. Most of us, that's our initial spark. But it's so easy to forget when you're in this feedback loop of wanting to be liked, wanting to get the better job, feeling the way that people talk to you at industry parties when you have a really impressive job coming up next, and the way they talk to you when you don't. And it's very distracting. And working on this movie and getting into Flannery's head and the integrity with which she pursued her independent vision, and didn't take notes from people she didn't respect, and hungered for input from people she did respect. That has been a huge part of some kind of shift that's happening in me.
It was
Powerful.
that's really well said. I want to say I had a really interesting experiences making the movie where sometimes, I was meeting Archdiocese of Louisville to ask permission to shoot in the Catholic churches. And he was an incredible person and asked a lot of really delicate and educated questions about the movie and what we were trying to accomplish with the movie. And we got to a place, and then at the end of it, he started quoting from Revelation, a good man is hard to find. He started quoting from these stories, and I realized how much he knew about the stories. And we started laughing. There's a line at the end of A Good Man is Hard to Find, which is a really funny line, which says that she'd be a good woman if she had somebody there to shoot her every day of her life. And it's a very funny line. And we, the whole room, which was kind of tense because we're talking about whether we can film and blah, blah, blah. Everybody started laughing. So thinking, this is amazing. This is a short story that is 70 years old, that's making a room of grown-ups burst into laughter and ask big questions about grace, forgiveness. It's a joke that penetrates the psyche even 70 years later. And it couldn't get published when it was first written. And she didn't change it. She wasn't trying to get followers. She wasn't trying to get likes. She had an inner compass and a discipline. And by writing with that level of discernment, it's actually time travel. And it is having lots of likes and lots of followers, and it is expanding. But it's what you said, that word, it's authentic. It is her voice. Like it, don't like it, have a problem with it, understand where she comes from. She's an American novelist, full of all the problems of being an American, full of all the, you know, what we are as a community, warts and all. She's telling her truth. And I'm really inspired, Maya, by what you say, you know, about trying to hear yourself and not trying to bend to, I know what it's like to walk to those, I've walked through those industry parties and have everybody, you know, oh, who do we get to stand next to him? And then I've been like pushed aside, you know, and it's, you feel, if you give them the power for your own self-worth, it's a very troubling journey, this life, you know, but it's very difficult to do. And I think it's more difficult for Maya's generation than it was for us, because there's so much noise that's not real.
No. And I think what Flannery teaches us is that if you do make authenticity your goal, if you are true to yourself, then it doesn't matter who agrees with you or disagrees with you, who thinks your art is great or doesn't. But if you abandon that authenticity, the whole world could say you're a genius.
And it's meaningless.
But when you put your head on your pillow at night, you know what's what, and you know what you've given up, and you've given up, you know, I think what she would say is you've given up everything, or certainly too much. You spoke about Ethan, you know, her struggle to get published, and really you focused the film on this period of her life where she is struggling to write, she is struggling to get published. How did you choose that time in her life to be the frame to look at this through?
Great question. And it was funny. That's when we're just not in control of things. It was so obvious. Maya's coming to me with this idea. She's 23 years old. Google Flannery O'Connor, diagnosed with lupus at 24. That her father had died of lupus. When she first got this diagnosis, she thought it was a death sentence. And she, you know, her father didn't live a year after the diagnosis, right? So that's when she got told this. And I think when a young person is faced with mortality, you know, when a really bright, serious person is faced with mortality at an extremely young age, that's a crisis. And I thought, all right, we're setting the movie then. It's Maya's perfect for the age. This is the universe telling me this is what the movie's supposed to be. And so we end the movie before she's ever had a book come out.
Right.
You know? And so we're seeing the creation of what's going to be these books. And so that's what, that came to me like an obvious lightning bolt. I mean, it was just, that was the path. That's where we're going.
So you talk about these projects in the book industry. You know, we say like books have a life of their own. You know, you can write the best book in the world and, you know, publish it 3 years outside of a world event and it doesn't do anything. But you can write something that you thought was just a little passion project and it, you know, comes right at the time of a world event and it can explode. And do movies have a life of their own?
Oh, absolutely. It's, you know, that's what Maya and I are doing here on this Zoom with you today, is hopefully engaging with you and people who respect you, to pitch a conversation about this movie for the future. You know, movies have a life. I'm amazed, you know, I made this movie called Gattaca 20 years ago, right? Movie was a huge bomb. I walked around New York the weekend it came out with the director with tears in his eyes because we couldn't find one quote from a major critic to put above the poster on one thing that said marvelous. Nobody said one superlative to stand for the movie, to help us, right? And it felt like a real failure. And I really liked the movie. And I can't say it's 20 years later, and I walk around and people are often wanting to talk to me about that film. And you know where they saw it? In their biology class in high school. Teachers across America liked the movie. They thought it was really interesting. Obviously, nobody figured out how to market the movie, whatever. Like you said, whatever was going on that weekend, Titanic had just come out or something, nobody paid attention. But they can and do have lives of their own. And it's very mysterious. Sometimes I'll make a movie that'll be a huge hit that nobody will ever ask me about ever again. It's like it went in and out of the consciousness. And sometimes I find it really fascinating. And I feel like right now, particularly with smaller movies, the theatrical release is kind of like putting a flag in the ground. We know nobody's going to, it's not going to be a box office runaway success, but you're kind of planting a flag so that over the coming years, people might find it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a movie I was watching it again during the week, and it is just a movie that will be watched over and over again. And I mean, you talk about high school biology classes. This movie needs to be watched by every high school English class. It needs to be discussed by every high school English class. It needs to draw them into, the big questions that really do only come up when we think about the idea of death, but they come up very quickly when we think about the idea of death. And young people, in their, natural belief that they think they're going to live forever, tend not to think about the big questions. And I think the movie can challenge them to think about the big questions as she did in her life and as she did in her writing. And I think the movie will have very long legs, even if only from that point of view. Maya, you're working on this project. I'm fascinated with what you're doing in music. How did working on Wildcat influence your music and how you're thinking about music and what you're doing there?
Well, because I think there's no way that this is gonna air in February. So I'll really answer that question, which is so much. I just made a new album right after I did Wildcat. I finished Wildcat, and then I went on a 3-month European tour, and then I went to Outlier Studios in upstate New York, and I made my third record. And I called it Chaos Angel, which I came up with while I was working on Wildcat, because I was spending a lot of time thinking about guardian angels and and the forces that move us in our lives towards these moments of happening. There are periods in your life where you feel like you're becoming yourself, and where all these different pieces of your experience are adding up and congealing, and the making of this movie felt like that for me. And I kind of was coming up with the idea of a guardian angel for me while I was making this movie, and she was like kind of an Amelia Bedelia Cupid, like a angel of love that was just always messing up, trying to do the right thing and always doing the wrong thing on accident. And I kind of based my whole record off of this guardian angel that I imagined when I was trying to imagine what it's like to think like Flannery. And not only that, I took some confidence that I'd earned on set and brought it with me on tour and brought it with me into the studio. And I think it made me a different kind of performer and a different kind of musician, and also just look at it all more deeply and with an attempt at the Flannery razor blade. I don't know that I succeeded, but my dad, he's here on this call, was always talking about how we had to make this movie differently than we made things usually. I don't know if you can tell from this conversation, we're both quite excitable. and often like to throw paint at the wall. You know, we used to sit down when I was a kid and do a watercolor to get watercolors together, and we call them masterpieces. And really, we just kind of moved water around with color and saw where it landed and how it melded. And I think a lot of the time we enjoy a creative process like that. Like, oh, let's improvise a scene and see what works. You know, we know these characters, let's try that. Let's shoot that wall. That wall looks cool. And this Flannery required, and I'm just saying things that you say, but Flannery required a razor blade approach. She edited rigorously. She made different decisions. She picked every room means something in that short story. The color of the curtains that she describes, you know, what facial expression does the person have that's on the bus? You know, it's a razor blade approach. And so we had to work that way. And I think through working that way on this movie, I'll never not be me. You know, I'll never not be a person who throws paint at the wall. But I do feel like I learned how to sharpen the razor blade a little bit.
Wow. How did Laura Linney come to be involved in the project?
Well, I did my Broadway debut with her when I was 21. She played Nina and I played Constantine in Chekhov's The Seagull. And we went through, that was a powerful experience in both our lives. And we've been friends since then. Yeah, that was 1991. We did that together. And so I've been following her career, and I knew that part of my job as a director was to give Maya a scene partner that would really challenge her. You know, that there's a danger when the father and daughter are working together that we needed to, what Maya was just saying about being discerning, having rigor with our work, being disciplined. Laura is all that. She's always that. I think she's one of the finest of my generation at what we do. And I really wanted Maya to have somebody like that there to hold the movie together. What I was asking the two of them to do, to play these different aspects of the same character, you know, to go in and out of the imagination, very difficult. Not to make that camp, not to make that silly, but to maintain wit and humor, but actually mean it. You know, that's that. And I knew we needed somebody great. And luckily for me, Laura loves Maya. I mean, Laura thinks she's amazing. We'd done a workshop of a play years ago, and when Maya was first starting at Juilliard. And so Maya was really on she was watching Maya, and she is from the South. She loves Flannery O'Connor. It was not a difficult sell, you know, but we needed a formidable artist. We needed somebody to come to set that made Maya and I really nervous, you know, because it needed to be a professional endeavor. We needed to be scared. It was good to have Liam there, Steve Zahn. We have a world-class DP. He doesn't care whether father and daughter get along. He's here to make art. You know, he's away from his family. He wants to make serious photography. Are we serious or not? And we needed those people in the room with us to make sure, you know, our best self could come forward.
Maya, what was it like working with Laura Linney, and were there any moments that you look back on particularly and say, oh, that was a moment?
Well, I think I went into it a little bit earlier just about how much she raised the bar for me. But there is a funny moment, just because funny moments are fun to talk about, where we were doing this scene together. You can see it in the movie, where we're walking along by the side of that train as it pulls away. And it was a really complicated and expensive shot. Every time that train moved, it was expensive and hard, and we had limited time. And it was hard to get it to move back. It moved really slow. And it was a difficult shot for Steve, because he had to track with us as we were walking right as the train moved away. It was a high stakes moment. And it was pretty early in my experience working with Laura. I was really nervous. And we were doing this walk and talk, and we were supposed to be tracking both of us, and kept not getting it right. And at one point, Dad says to Laura, you're doing such a good job finding the camera behind Maya. You know, you're doing such a good job. And my heart started to break. I was like, I'm blocking Laura Linney. Like, I can't feel the camera behind my head, and don't know how to give her I want the camera on her. How am I blocking her? And like, it's like, yeah, God, Laura, you really can feel the camera so well. And I was like, I want to be able to feel the camera. I can't feel the camera at all right now. I am so like, am I ever going to be able to feel the camera? And eventually he's like, great, we got it. And we go to the little like muck room, and I'm sitting there taking out my teeth, and I'm just, sheets of tears start pouring down my face. And Laura goes, you okay? And Dad comes in, and I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And Dad comes in, and Laura's in there, and all of a sudden, and he looks at me, gives me one look and goes, are you okay? And I'm like, I can't feel the camera. I just want you to respect me. I don't know. I'm trying to do a good job. And Laura laughed. And I actually think that that's a moment I really earned her respect. Because I think that she could tell how much I cared.
Yeah.
And how much I wanted to be good, and how hard I was working. And I think that was, that was the day that I stopped messing up my accent in front of her. We broke through into a barrier where I felt, rather than afraid to disappoint her, I felt like I had an opportunity to grow from her, and I felt held by her. And I don't know, that's an anecdote.
Yeah. Were there people who didn't want you or didn't think you should make this movie? Thought it was bad for your career or bad next move or any of that?
When my dad is this way too, when I get really excited about something, I think, first of all, no, nobody said it was bad. But I do think that if I had showed any nerves about it to anyone but my dad, like if I called my agent and been like, do you think this is a good idea? No idea what
Would
they
have
would have
said no. You can't open the door for that.
Yeah. I wasn't worried that it was a bad idea. There was things I was afraid about. There were moments where I worried that I couldn't do it. There was moments that I worried people wouldn't be able to receive Flannery right now. There were moments that I worried people wouldn't be able to receive me and Dad working together right now. I had all those fears, but none of them stood as an impediment to how deeply I felt we were meant to make this movie. And so I wasn't going to ever dip my toe in the water of asking anyone who might if it was a bad idea.
What about yourself, Ethan? Did people weigh in on that?
It's so funny. It's such a funny thing that you asked that question, because it's like we were talking earlier. Knowing when to listen and when to lead is very difficult. It's just I think it's part of the process of growing up, is you really do have to be a good listener and understand what people who love you and care about you think and do. And you also have to be a leader of your own life. It's your obituary is yours and mine is mine. And the people, how our days are limited, and we have these moments to use what we're called to do. And if you ask too much and you take too many people's opinion, you'll never do anything. You'll never do anything meaningful or substantive. And I found really early, if you ask people, do you think I should play Hamlet? Smart people will say, who's the director? Are they producing it right? Is there enough budget? Ray Fiennes did Hamlet last year. I don't know if the world's ready for another Hamlet. Well, wait, let's make sure you get the right Claudius. There's might be a better job offer coming up. Maybe you shouldn't commit right now. There's a moment you have to say, I want to play Hamlet. I'm doing it, and I don't care what I miss, and I don't care if it goes badly. It's my obituary. I'm going to have this experience. And you have to let the chips fall where they may. You might get terrible reviews. You might miss an opportunity, but it's really okay because you got to play Hamlet. I mean, it's a pretty great scenario. And likewise, in if you were to ask professional people, hey, do you think I want to make a movie about the intersection between faith and imagination, and I want to use a couple months of Flannery O'Connor's life, a very volatile, much loathed, much reviled, much heralded Catholic fiction writer, to do so.
By the way, she's a woman.
And by the way, she's a woman. And by the way, there's going to be, it's not going to be about love affairs. It's really going to be about her relationship to God. That's what I want. If my goal in life is to sell a movie for a lot of money, that's a bad idea. I mean, we better get some zombies in there. We better have some, I mean, there's a lot of ways to make a movie that sells, but it is our life. And if you said to me, hey, you get to make a movie with your favorite actor, your daughter, and it gets to be about things that you really believe in, and you get to make art about secrets inside yourself, and you're going to get to work with this amazing team of people. What bad could come from that? It's even, I love even in negativity, if somebody walks into your room and says, I don't like that painting on your wall, what are you doing with that? I guarantee you the conversation that follows in the next half hour is valuable.
Yes.
Why do you like that? And you can explain to them. And I bet you anything, you end up loving it even more. I mean, it's so this idea that there's a right move and a wrong move, I try to, it's just, is it what I'm supposed to be doing? And I never had any doubt about that.
When I hear you talk, there's been a couple of moments through our conversation where you've spoken about, really listening to yourself, following that voice. When I hear you speak about that, I hear a lot of experience. I hear something that's probably been arrived at by taking some wrong roads and some right roads and measuring, how they've
been shed.
Yeah. And then when I hear your daughter speak, I have a sense that she has a much greater sense of that at her tender age than you probably did. What is it like as a father to see that in your daughter?
Reasons to live. Unexpected reasons to live. You hear a lot about diminishments. Flannery wrote very beautifully about diminishments, in that our health can be taken away from us. Everything is given and everything is taken away. And handling our diminishments can be a great education about what we've been given and what we have. Sometimes until something is taken away, you don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. And there's many diminishments that come with growing older, but there's all these unexpected gifts. I visited, it was a couple of years ago now, I visited Maya on set in Atlanta. She was making Stranger Things, and her brother was living with her. It was kind of during the pandemic, so he had a break from college, and you feel yourself a part of their poem. And all my life, I thought I was living my poem, and I didn't realize I'm a supporting character in other people's poems, and that our lives are in service of things that we don't understand. And seeing the two of them so healthy and so strong, and was, what I mean is, it was like the best thing that ever happened to me. And I didn't know something like that could happen. Until I was 50, I didn't even know that this gift would be given to me. And I didn't know what it would feel like. And I'm like, oh, wow, this thing of aging is kind of amazing if you open your eyes. And so when you ask that question, my answer is, it's just wonderful.
We live in a culture that is allergic to depth and, fascinated with superficiality. I think Flannery O'Connor reminds us that depth and seriousness are deeply agreeable to the human spirit, and that we cannot live without depth and some level of seriousness in our lives. The movie's brilliant, Wildcat. Hope everyone goes and sees it. I think you've honored a great person with a great movie, and it's been great to have this conversation with you today, and I look forward to the next time our paths cross.
Thank
Me
you so
too.
much. Well, I'm really touched, and I'm really grateful for the time with you.
Thank you, Matthew. It's really wonderful conversation.
Thank you so
Really
much.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.